we are on the heels again, 24 hours after another virtual guest last night.
Great
and fantastic, Dr. Jonathan Fields down in Florida. Very excited for that too, because he's super open to us coming down.
Yep.
And visiting him, and with your brother being down there and some other family members, I think that would be a phenomenal trip.
Yep. Great journey.
Given his interconnectedness into the medical world and also the world of martial arts, I think that would be quite the experience for everyone involved. But that said, we are now with our next guest for this evening, and I'm going to read off a short bio for Dr. Melvin Brown. We've got another Dr. Brown in the house, actually. So
Brown number 2.
Brown squared. We're doubling up tonight. But Dr. Melvin Brown, is a concierge medicine doctor at Charleston Medicine and Behavioral Health. He's also a part-time emergency medicine doctor working at the Veterans Administration Medical Center and a member of the Board of Trustees of the Medical University of South Carolina, and a retired officer from the U.S. Navy, achieving the rank of commander, which we have great timing because Veterans Day is just around the corner.
That's right.
So we're going to roll this Earnest Medicine intro, and we will be right back with Dr. Melvin Brown's introduction. Thanks for tuning in to Earnest Medicine. All right, so episode number, 11, whatever we're at for Earnest Medicine. It's the numbers are climbing though. It's impressive. So we're actually going to turn this over for an introduction with Dr. Melvin Brown and let him give us some backstory and what he's been up to. So kicking it over to you, Doctor. How's it going? Let us know your intro, and we'll dive into this thing.
Well, thank you for the time, fellas. It's nice to meet both of you. Nice to meet another Dr. Brown.
Always.
But we got to be careful to make sure that we don't get the records mixed up. But anyway, welcome to Charleston virtually. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
You may have heard of us before. We are a drinking town with a history problem. Okay. We have gotten that moniker now for about 10 years. But anyway, yeah, I'm just in the midst of starting this new practice, this new life. Just a little bit about me. I'm a native Charlestonian, and born and raised here. It's been quite an experience watching the evolution of this city. I was born right around the time of civil rights literally cooling off. I have a claim to fame of being one of the first class of babies being born in the majority hospital here in Charleston.
Wow.
So that's how I came into this world. But anyway, son of two first generation college graduates. Both were teachers in the front and at the onset. My father veered off into a world of corporate medicine, and my mother stayed a teacher of chemistry and physics for almost 30 years. Wow. So needless to say, I couldn't do poorly in school without hearing about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I got through high school just fine. And when it came time to figure out a college, a little unique thing in that I grew up in this kind of a white-collar, little bit of blue-collar black neighborhood. But all the kids in the neighborhood went to the public school, and I went to the private school. So I kind of was considered soft by standards in the neighborhood. So when it came time for college, I wanted to prove that I didn't need my dad or his money to be successful. So I started looking around at scholarships and different opportunities. And I landed on going to the United States Naval Academy. That's how I ended up there.
Fantastic.
About 6 months into it, I was like, I could have gone the soft route and that would have been just fine. But anyway, I got through it, and I literally just got through it. I chose engineering as a degree because my dad said that was a good one. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so my GPA reflected it when I finished up. And also, the 4 years you're there, you're like, well, if this doesn't work out, all I got to do is finish, and there's a job on the other end.
Yeah.
So I graduated and got commissioned in the United States Navy as an ensign. And I started my career not in medicine, but as a destroyer engineer, a warship destroyer engineer. And I did that for about 4 years at sea, going around and seeing amazing things. I could never afford to travel the way I traveled in the first from years 21 to 25. I mean, I hit 5 countries in the Black Sea, for example. But anyway, it was a great growing experience, learning experience. But at the end of it, I said, being the commanding officer of a warship, albeit an honorable thing, was not the thing I wanted to do with my life. So I went back to the drawing board and I said, what is it that I want to do? Well, I do love science. I do love taking care of people. So I decided this will be a time where I'm going to figure out, can I get into med school? I didn't have a great GPA, like I said earlier. So I was doing some night classes, taking some of the money that the government set aside for you to advance yourself. And I got a master's degree in education and biology. I wanted to put forth some good grades. I went to the student admissions people. They also said, hey, you went to Service Academy. We're going to add some points to your GPA. Well, all of a sudden now I'm qualified to go to med school. And that's how I got into it. So that's,
excellent.
Boom. I'm going to try to wrap this up a little quicker, but got into medicine. While in med school, I decided that I wanted to be a primary care doctor. One of my great examples of why I always wanted to be a doctor, aside from my grandparents wanting my dad to go to med school and he didn't, was that my pediatrician was just one of those memories of my life. And I actually went into peds. I did my internship in peds, and after 2 NICU neonatal ICU rotations and a couple of months of peds intern clinic where they give you a hard case, I decided that maybe it wasn't the future for me.
Okay.
Now, being in the military, after a year, you are expected to go away to the fleet for 2 to 3 years, be a flight surgeon, ship's doctor. I was a ship's doctor, and this is what I wanted to get to. I look back on 22 years of medicine, and those 2 years where I was a ship's doctor were probably 2 of the happiest years of my medical professional life. I was a doctor for a ship of 600 sailors and Marines, and I was responsible for all aspects of their preventive care. And when they were sick, when they were hurt, wherever we were, they had my phone number. I told them, if you are thinking about going to an urgent care and ER, you call me first. And gents, I got to tell you, I just felt full. I really enjoyed that time. And it was sad when I left the ship. But I was excited because I decided that I wanted to be able to do more after having been out to sea and by myself. I wanted to be able to do more as far as procedures, so I chose to go back and do emergency medicine.
Okay.
Now, when you do emergency medicine in the Navy, I didn't realize this. You pretty much belong to the Marines at that point. Marines are within the Department of the Navy. So instead of my nice life of ships and staterooms, I found myself going to Afghanistan not once but twice.
Wow.
Yes.
My first camping trip ever was in Afghanistan. I'm a glamper.
Not much glamping there.
That was a bit of a stretch for me. But the long and short of it is I finished out a full naval career. I retired in 2014 with 20 years in. And I transitioned into an emergency medicine job at a for-profit hospital. I was saying it's time to make up for some financial shortfalls after having served in the military for a while. So I picked the highest paying job. And it was also the hospital with the sickest people. Enjoyed it. I became proficient. But I started to learn about the healthcare system. And the first thing about it was that I would have these patients in my care for 2 to 3 hours at a time. And at the end of that emergency stay, they would always say, hey, because no one knows emergency medicine is a specialty. They go, hey, can I come to your practice? And I'm like, this is my practice. But what I was realizing is, if I have a patient in the emergency department and we're doing blood work and CTs and x-rays and I'm seeing them several times, I get to know them. I get to know their family that's sitting there. And that's something that the primary care doctor that I was going to send them to if I discharged them home did not get to do. Not because the primary care doctors are not good or don't care, but the model is a primary care doctor in a city this size is going to be in a corporate situation having to see 40 to 60 patients a day.
An impossible number.
You're gonna get torpedoed when one person says, "Hey, doc, I really need to talk," and now you're behind.
And then you got a 30-year-old practice manager telling you, you need to catch up.
There you go. Exactly. So I was learning about the real world because military medicine is more like a public medicine model, and your full clinic is 20 there for the primary care doctors in the military. So out in the world, I said, this is awful. And then as I was with the group for 7 years, it got a corporate takeover of the group, and my RVUs, my compensation for production, kept trending down and down and down. I said, what am I doing here, doing night shifts and evening shifts and taking stuff off of people who are just in a revolving door medical system? I want to have a connection with patients. So I got the life coach hired, and we were trying to figure out what to do. Be corporate. I mean, I have leadership experience. We had some interviews, and I said, wow, when you're corporate medicine, you're pretty much a henchman to keep the doctors in line, or as some would say, herding the cats. So I decided that was not the job for me. And she said, I'm sorry, you're just one of those doctors who likes patients. You got to find something in that space. Step in concierge medicine, where I actually get a chance to have a captive audience of people who are invested in their care and really want to have a relationship with their primary care doctor. I know that was a big blur, but that's kind of how we got to where we are today. And I learned about Dr. Ernest Brown because he's one of the people who's a part of what I'm calling a revolution that changed the game, you know, trying to get back to being country doctors in the city, so to speak, you know, connecting with patients, knowing patients, and like not having to look at my computer to figure out what's going on with that patient. I love it. I'm just starting, but I'm really optimistic about it. We just started about 5 months ago.
And so we have a mutual friend, Elizabeth.
Yes, we do.
Nelson, and we went to Howard together, and Elizabeth is just raw energy. She is a fireball.
She is
love
raw
her to death,
energy,
and
is
I get this text that there's this other Brown down south that hey, might need your help, and I was like, okay, happy to. But the what you said is you were born and raised in Charleston. I'm born and raised in D.C., and that whole sense of where you are born and raised, there's there's a difference between somebody who has moved several times and we're rooted where we are, and it even makes it more important for us, I think, because it's our legacy. We're not jumping around. We're here. We're rocks. And physicians used to be rocks in the community. Like you said, you're a pediatrician. I'd have to ask the question, where is that doc now? What's his legacy, in the light of where healthcare now is just factory work, that, I would love to, learn more about that pediatrician and capture his, history or legacy and story, because it shows the impact upon you and then where you carried it. Now you find yourself in this space. There's little seeds he planted in you, little seeds of, kind of like, this is the way you do medicine, right? Along the way, healthcare tried to change you, but it didn't work. So you're back where you're back where you started, at your roots again. So, I mean, I think, that for me is exciting to have another physician who's in that process, because you and I, we are getting to that age where at some point, if we don't provide a glimmer to younger physicians that the healthcare system is broken and we're not going to fix it because we didn't make it, then what else would we? Honestly, you don't and I don't have a choice to do medicine unless we do it like the way we are trying to do it. Healthcare will not allow us to do it, right? So I think, you're coming into the realm of concierge medicine and that concept, because patients will hear this word and has a lot of connotations to it. Like
it does.
When you started to hear about this, what were your first thoughts? I mean, did you know anybody else who was doing it? How did you get to this?
Well, you're right. There are many connotations. First, I thought, oh, that's what upper class people get.
Yeah.
That's the first connotation. Or that's what people who don't worry about the cost of healthcare do. And I started to do more research and realized that there was more than one model. The first person that took me in, so to speak, to show me the way, his model was a pure cash only type model. You pay that practice a monthly fee, and that's it. There's no insurance involved. There's no, we're going to send some insurance paperwork in for your lab work or, the images that I order. Now, he said, if you want me to give you a receipt and you want to try to get your insurance to reimburse you, fine, but I am not dealing with this. And he was an internal medicine doctor that had been practicing for 10 years. And he said, I had it with insurance companies. And that's what motivated him to do that. So it sounded to me like something that maybe hiring clients would be benefiting from more so than the general community. And it also sounded to me like a way of an internal medicine doctor saying, I'm out.
Double-edged sword. I had a brief question because, you talk about this. It's a very old methodology of practicing medicine, right? It's sort of how medicine began. You go to people's home, you care for them where they're at. But we've gotten to a place in our society where that's not the general mindset about medicine. When I think about doctors and healthcare, I think about going and sitting in a lobby. That's how I perceive it. And I think that's how a lot of people in our society perceive medicine today. So my question, I know, is how has it been received from people you've interacted with in DC? And now that you're sort of entering this field in Charleston and South Carolina, what is the attitude around it from those you interact with? Are they sort of like, oh, I haven't heard of that in a while? Or are they receptive to it? Is there a little bit of pushback? Like, what do you do? How has that been for you?
Want to go first, Dr. Ernest?
Well, I mean, for myself, it's not until they've actually used my service as a physician.
Yeah.
They have no idea. I mean, just 2 days ago, I scooped up a patient, threw him in my car, and we went to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And I sat there with the patient in the emergency room,
right,
to make sure that things were moved in the right direction. Because shifting from a physician to essentially a human being and an advocate, I could sit in a someplace and not know what happened.
Right.
And I had too many horror stories of clients who went out of town and then went to an ER and it was a disaster. And, it's like, okay, well, but I would say it's only until they fully appreciate what I do that I'm all in. And I think that's very much the important part, that it's when you don't own your own practice, when you patients don't see that you are fully in, they're gonna be put off by it. I'm hearing more and more of patients who are saying, "Oh yeah, my physician shifted to concierge." I was okay. Well,
probably a good thing.
I asked, why do you think they went to concierge? Was it, I mean, what's the motivating factor for it? So, but on your end, how's it been your reception down there?
So first off, it's still a lot of explaining because concierge is a relatively new concept in the Southeast. Maybe Atlanta, maybe Miami, but outside of those cities, it's still a new concept. The person who took me under his wing, he'd been doing it for 11 years, and he was the first. And then people's first reaction when I say concierge medicine is they call out the big, the big cat in the. Can I say the name of the company?
Sure. I mean, we are fully self-funded. We don't have any sponsors.
Okay.
I don't care. I'm punk rock, so let it roll.
Okay. When I say concierge medicine, they say, "Oh, like MDVIP," and I say, "Okay, let's start there." And it's want to kind of meet you where you know. And I said, "All right." So yes, MDVIP. This is a company that goes around and finds practices and buys them and converts them into concierge.
Yes.
So people are aware of that. And it's kind of popular with a certain demographic. They're like, "Oh, I like that. You get this." And then the conversation starts. I understand that you go to your appointments and they're on time. I'm like, yeah. I understand that you can send your doctor a message. I'm like, and they'll respond. I'm like, yeah. And you start thinking about it. Like you said, John, we're all so conditioned to think that the doctor's office is not much different from the DMV.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah.
And so, but the conversation gets going, and that's good. But I wanted to kind of put another comment under when I said high-end people or high-end clients. Doing this so far, I've been surprised with the fact that I've been signing some people that you probably would not expect to be signed.
Yep, absolutely.
High deductible plan people.
Yep.
That are on affordable health care. I have some. I'm already getting a little niche business with sous chefs and chefs.
Yes, yeah.
These are folks that kind of are understanding. As a bartender, people are understanding that, hey, couple $100 to have a doc,
Yeah.
not have to deal with fill in the blank.
Yep.
That's worth it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And I think when you get into the realm of business ownership, you begin to identify time as money, and you understand the value of efficiency in certain processes. And that's where you go to the ER. Like I went to the ER with Carlos when he had that scooter accident. We sat there for 9 hours, and I felt like so guilty I couldn't leave him, so I just sat with him the whole night. But I mean, that was 9 hours. I could have been doing anything else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that if you're somebody who's operating a business, those are very costly 9 hours, right? It's not just what you paid at the ER. It's all the money you lost out on by not doing whatever else you could have been doing.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
yeah, I think that's a
selling point.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had billionaire clients argue over a $50 charge on a bill. And I've had people who are like, look, hey, no need, no, don't worry about it. And they're like, nope, I'm paying that bill, and I'm like, wow. Okay. I mean, it's telling, there are, I would say that, trying to do everything for everyone is not going to be possible in our shoes. But if people understand what we're trying to do, and there's a mutual respect for that, and, there's a sense of, I would say empowerment. It's empowerment of the physician, and it's the empowerment of the patient to make decisions and choices in a system that doesn't give you that. Patients don't have choice, and certainly physicians don't in the healthcare system that is controlled by insurance companies. And you see a business like MDVIP who sees an opportunity, and it is a business model. So a franchise for MDVIP made good business sense. And I used to know the gentleman who founded it, and bravo. You listen to the heartstrings, right, of clients who wanted something different, and you profited off of a system that fails. And again, bravo to you. I have no complaints. For them, they are in a sense showing a different model, and guaranteed they've come up against a lot of pushback. When things like this happen, insurance companies don't like this. They don't want to play, and they certainly don't want to say,
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of want to get you started. Give us your feedback on that. How does that make you feel?
Yeah. Bring it on.
So I was supposed to be signing people up in July, and I just started signing them up eight and a half weeks ago. Okay. Why did it take so long? Well, first hurdle. Everything is controlled by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, Blue Cross Blue Shield is right there behind them. And they have 85% of the market share here. So you got to satisfy those masters, so to speak. So at first, when I was doing my business plan a year out, pro forma, I was considering doing a practice where I did not deal at all with insurance. So the first thing I found out is, I was going to do this in transition. I didn't have a practice. I was starting from zero. So my plan was to work ER on the weekends and work in my practice during the week. Well, Medicare, you got to be in or out.
Yep.
You got to make a choice.
Yeah. And they're sneaky about it because when you are a medical student and a resident, you don't know it, but you are owned. And you actually have to, in order to be unowned and be able to be independent, you have to send to Medicare a letter that says, please take me off your list.
Yes.
I am opting out. Why? I know I opted in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And people
it was
don't know.
crazy. I did not know this.
Yeah.
How do people not know?
If I had opted out of Medicare, then I would have lost my job in the hospital.
ER. Yep.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It is the mafia.
Yeah. They've got a stranglehold.
Yeah. And, I've got friends over here. They're CMS, Medicare's right down the street, just a few blocks.
You're right there.
Yeah. And I've been recruited, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm, for advisory and consulting. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And then, of course, no government entity. And I could say this because I'm a retired military guy, and I'm also part-time in the VA. No government entity moves fast. So the government entity that you have to get credentialed with is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And of course, I told you Blue Cross Blue Shield is the biggest payer, and they are in lockstep.
Yep.
Every other payer, Cigna, United, whatever, you can call in and generally get a person on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
These entities, you cannot get a person on the phone. You go on the website for CMS, they'll say, if you need help, send us an email and we will get back to you.
Yeah.
They said,
Yeah, right.
we will not give you a number. You cannot, and they don't say this, but you will not get a human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are working at our own pace.
But they make medical decisions. And that's the insane part. You know, so I have a good buddy of mine who developed a really bad sinus infection. And so his ear, nose, and throat specialist was like, oh, well, you need to get this special CT done. And, you know, the insurance rejected it. And this was an expert on that particular type of imaging for diagnosis for this. And so he sent in all of his articles, still rejected by the insurance company. So basically he called up the insurance company and said, look, set me up an appointment. You know, I need to get seen by my doctor. And they were like, what do you mean? Yeah, we'll go see your doctor. It's like, no, well, you're my doctor. You're making the medical decisions. So give me a time. I'll be there. And
I love it.
The claim, you know, the prior authorization got approved pretty quickly after that, you know.
Really?
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
I wanted to take a step back, and given the proximity that we are to Veterans Day, I wanted to dive in just a little bit more on your career at that time of your life. And I also want to reference this weekend I had the chance to interview a lot of World War II and Vietnam veterans, and I work closely with a gentleman who runs a podcast called Veterans Chronicles. His name's Greg Corumbus, and one of his final questions on all of our interviews is, you know, what are you most proud of, or what do you miss most from your time in the service? And the resounding answer, more often than not, is the camaraderie that you had with the people around you. And I know that as a business owner and an independent practitioner, sometimes that camaraderie can be a little bit absent. It's not always there whenever you're tackling problems on your own. And I'd really like to hear your thoughts on being in an environment like the Navy where you were with people all the time, you were working together toward a common goal, and then what that looked like as you started to transition now into concierge medicine where, you know, sometimes you might be operating a little more independently. Mm-hmm. How has that looked for you, and what kind of contrasts do you see, or things you may not like, or things you like?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first was talking to Carlos, I think I shared a story with him that another one of the motivations for me to do what I did and do it in the military was that the first time I interacted with a military doctor when I was a ship's engineer, I was a little disappointed. I hate to say this, but, you know, you come across a person that's not 100% all in. Yeah. And the crew had basically made their mind up that that doctor on our ship was just there to pay back his tuition. Mm-hmm. He wasn't engaging, wasn't trying to be a part of the crew. And it was a disappointment. And that was one of those things where I said, this guy's not a team player. Mm. We are all a team here. He's not getting this concept. And this is a person who, that was really their first military experience. They went to school, not, you know, civilian university. And at graduation, they said, here's a uniform. There's a ship. Go. And he just was thrown into this world. To his defense, he was just thrown into this world. But the idea of the closeness and camaraderie was foreign to him. And it motivated me, too, to say, I'd like to do this. And I know I'd come back and be a Navy doctor who was there. And I walked the deck plates with the sailors, you know, mm-hmm. and I know their lives. And now I'm a doctor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But stepping back a second to Annapolis, going to college, I joked about it earlier, but you know, I would have loved going to civilian college, not going to military school. Definitely would have been a lot of fun. Would have been a whole different degree of social development. Mm-hmm. But one reason why I have no regrets about the Naval Academy was because the friends I made are lifelong friends, mm-hmm. and I will not go a year without seeing my friends. Mm-hmm. And the camaraderie is unparalleled, and I don't think quite understood by a lot of people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when I was in the Navy as a doctor, my best times were when I was what we use a word called operational, and we use administrative. Mm-hmm. If you're operational, you're involved in a warfighting effort. You're on a ship. You're with the Marines. You're with Special Forces. Admin is back at home in the hospital doing the chief medical officer jobs and things like that. Mm-hmm. if you read my military record, I kept getting pushed to operational because that's where I would shine.
Yeah.
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 I was not in danger of making admiral.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But I was always, the people like me will definitely always make commander or captain because they appreciate the people who are willing to go do those jobs away. Because those units were tight. I love that lifestyle. Now, getting out of the Navy, luckily, I think I was in a specialty emergency medicine where we were tight, all of us tight. Were just a bunch of different personalities, and it worked out well. Okay. So that was great. But when I started talking to the consultants, I started to realize that doctors out in the real world are not really on board together all the time, particularly specialists and subspecialists.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And now I'm out here doing this practice, and I told you about Dr. Dave, who took me under his wing and showed me his practice. And I feel it mostly because he was so established. I don't think he was threatened by me wanting to learn from him at all. But it's not, and people aren't effusive with the knowledge. And I hate to beat these guys up, but I've reached out to a couple of MDVIP doctors, and they've not been interested in having a drink or partnering. So that's been a disappointment. So I've had to do a lot of grassroots stuff. But I am going up to people and engaging them and meeting them where they are. And when they get to know me, things work out a little better.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a certain sense of loneliness as a concierge? Independent?
Yes, but it's evolving. I think more people are getting used to it. Just the other day, you're talking about an emergency run. Two quick emergency anecdotes. One of my clients cut her finger, and she contacted me. You know, she's like, "What do I do? What do I do?" And I said, "Well, I know you live on this town, not necessarily close to her house, but I knew it was a freestanding where I worked, and people were generally going to be brought back quickly." It was, and she was so happy for that because she wasn't waiting 9 hours that she would have if she'd gone to university. She went to this place. They got her back there within 15 minutes, and she was on her way back home in an hour. That was valuable to her. Another person I sent to another emergency department in a more affluent part of town, and I called ahead. Because I couldn't leave at the time to call the emergency doctors. You know, I speak their language to say, "Hey, man, I'm sending you something that's coming to me." It's like, "All right, why are you calling me?"
Yeah, they don't call anymore. Yeah.
I got the vibe from that person a place where I hadn't worked, where I'm really busy. Why do I have to pick up the phone and talk to you about this? And when did we get to a place where we weren't happy to hear from another doctor about a patient you were seeing?
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
I think that's a little piece of social commentary too. You think about being able to go up and answer the door when someone knocked, 15 or 20 years ago. Most people are not quite as open to outside interaction. I feel like we're very conditioned at this point to go through, mobile devices or digital interfaces, things that are easier to navigate through and not have that like face-to-face. But you talk about, your friend group in Charleston being a really important element to your success there. And especially now as you embark on this new business adventure, these are people who have sort of been your rock. You talk a little bit about your family and your kids in here, and also a really solid friend group. And I'd be curious to know more about how important those elements have been to you.
Oh, first off, you got to talk about your wife and your kids. Yes. My wife is a military child. This military life of mine was new. I was the first person in my family to do it. But my wife was what we call a military brat. Her father was Air Force, and she traveled the world. And she brings an interesting element to it because her dad was a little short of being a great Santini.
Okay. Yes.
So she came from a stern household, and I say that because if you give, she can go with the flow. She can survive. She can get through anything, and that has been so good. I married her, and we moved 6 times in the first 11 years of our marriage, and she just rolled with it. And we had a very comfortable life with me working emergency medicine at the for-profit hospital. And I come home one day and I say, "Hey, I want us to go through a 40% pay cut because I want to chase this dream. And she
Yeah.
says, 40% pay cut. She's like, how does that impact me?
Yeah.
I said, well, I can do this, this, and with things. She's like, go for it, baby. I know you're great. You're gonna do great. So that, that's my cheerleader. That's my first step.
Yeah.
My kids, they look up to me and they're like, Dad, you want to do this? This is great. Just don't take care of any of my friends.
Yeah.
I'd be so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Okay. So as long as I don't embarrass my 16-year-old, I'm okay. Rules like, whatever, Dad, go ahead.
Yeah.
My friend group, I told you Charleston had a history problem. Charleston's got some interesting dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the deep South, but it's not a deep South city.
Mm-hmm.
It's a port city.
Mm-hmm.
This was the place where, depending on which statistics you believe, 60 to 85% of enslaved Africans came through this port.
Oh my gosh.
And you think to yourself, oh man, must be like Mississippi burning down here.
Mm-hmm.
But no, a port city is kind of be the closest thing you get to a more open society of anything in the Southeast. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Port cities bring in foreigners, all the time. And that brings a certain mix to the city. So the old Charleston was mixed in that black people and white people were completely living amongst each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't think for a second I'm telling you there was not a social code.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as being with next door to a black person was not unheard of in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike when I went to college about the neighborhoods in the Northeast, which were serious lines drawn by ethnicity.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're starting. Then here I am. I was in a black neighborhood and I went to the big prep school. So I had my neighborhood people and I had my prep school people. And both of those groups have uplifted me.
Mm-hmm.
The neighborhood people are proud of what I've, done in my life. The school kids, I was very close to them and I was their first, a lot of those guys, the first black person they talked to.
Mm-hmm.
And built bridges. And these folks are like, hey, this guy is a good guy. This guy is somebody you want to talk to. This guy, it's not about race, blah, blah, blah. This guy is about business and you can trust him. It's one of the reasons why I'm on the board of trustees at MUSC. The
Mm-hmm.
position came available and these two friend groups lobbied to get me to do this job and go to the state assembly and do the confirmation hearings and get elected to this position.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have that friend group, I don't have that position.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of catapulted me into different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So that friend group has been important. And then through it all too, aside from my wife, has been my two roommates from the Naval Academy who constantly support me and encourage me. They're the ones who told me when I was 19 years old, hey man, you've got a special gift for making people trust you and feel good about you. And I didn't listen to those guys for a long time. I was like, whatever. And when in my 30s, I was like, hey, they might know what the hell they're talking about. So, and I'm trying to capitalize on that and use it in my career.
Mm-hmm. No, that's everything. It's that connection that we have with people.
Yeah.
That's very much what, that's what inspires me every day. Every day, I don't know what my day will be like. And, but I do know that I'll be interacting with people who have their own experiences. Yeah. Being born and raised here in Washington, D.C., it's a lot of history to it.
Yeah.
And, internationally as well. But, I take so much from my interactions with patients. Many times I'll even tell patients this is therapeutic for me. Because
it 100% is.
Yeah. And then maybe I should be paying them for the therapy. But that being the case, I honestly don't know what else I would do, I enjoy other things as hobbies like photography and video and, doing this series. But apart from that, and science and research, that's my base. But it's that sense of connectedness and caring for people that really, gets me,
Yeah.
You just struck a chord. You just said, I don't know what else I would do. And here I am on the front end of this, right? I'm new to it. And I'm in love with it already.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of fear in me right now. If this thing doesn't work, I don't know what else I'm going to do because I've found it.
Yes. Yeah.
Charleston medicine.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think you certainly have the charisma and the personality to really succeed in this new adventure. And
Thanks, John.
even though you were a little late on your friend's advice about really accepting what they were saying, I think you've finally honed in on it, and I feel like that's a recipe for success moving forward.
I mean, you could have signed up for MD VIP, that would have been an easy route. A lot of people do that. It's a franchise, it's cookie cutter, and, but you still, that sense of independence, which is what I appreciate. Me being, DC punk rocker back in the day, it's all about doing it yourself, Really, I mean, imagine if you go into some industry, like what if you were instead like a rapper or something like that? And I got to go to New York just to get signed by a label. And no, I'm just a musician, I can do this and do it well and be proud of what I do, But, there's all those things tempting, to go big, go hard. And
go big. The home of bad brains.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You hit that chord. You talk about hitting the chord. Yes.
I wanted to live in D.C. when I was in Annapolis. I said, this is where I'm going to settle down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But life took me in different directions.
No, that's true. I mean, where you find yourself now and where you will find yourself in the future, it is, that is what it is, capitalize on it. But
one quick anecdote for you, Ernest.
Yeah.
DC was very important in my social life when I was in the Naval Academy.
Yeah, it's not far from here.
Yeah, so 35 miles away. And you're released at noon on Saturday, and you're free until Sunday evening at the Naval Academy. So
whatever happened in between there.
And go to DC.
yeah, whatever happened in between then. They didn't need to know. Yeah.
There weren't a lot of women in Annapolis, and there wasn't a lot to do if you're under 21 in Annapolis. So I tried Baltimore first. Not my thing.
Whoa,
DC was the one.
Yeah. So what time was that? That would have been 80s, 90s.
Yeah, 87 and 91, and I had one of my neighborhood friends I was telling you about earlier. Went to Howard, and he lived on the corner of 5th and S. And this was during the crack epidemic and everything that was happening.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a Wrangler soft top, and I would go to his place on the weekends. And then the dealers on the corner, they called all of us College. That was our name. Hey, College, what's going on? And no one ever messed with that Wrangler soft top sitting in the middle of DC. So,
but you were in fatigues or plain clothes?
Well, either whites, summer whites, or plain clothes.
Yeah, well, yeah, those were choice times. I mean, that in DC, that was a hard time because of, I remember in May of 1986 and then June, the difference between when crack wasn't available and then it flooded the DC streets. I mean, it was a madhouse. That summer was just insane.
Watch the city fall apart.
But, it also, I would say, we lost generation of people. There's no question. DC.
The war.
Oh, yeah. And it took out entire blocks, neighborhoods, generation, and horrific. But, DC's still here. The people are here, move through it. Certainly areas, in DC where I've served in wards 7 and 8, which are the low socioeconomic areas, you could feel that vibe and like people got through it. That hurricane hit hard, but I think there's a rebirth from it, which is important. That if you have faith and you just keep it moving, you'll get through it. But so one of the things we like to end on is like, okay, well, is it all right if we come on down? That kind of thing.
Yeah, not far from you.
Because I know that Elizabeth and Matt have a house there too, and she's like, yeah, you should come down. I was like, okay. Yeah, we'll film too when we come. So don't be camera shy. And I know Elizabeth will not be camera shy.
Yeah.
So,
and we actually, your friend James Jordan and his wife Kristen Rhodes, her father was originally a house called, I don't know, is he still practicing there? Part-time?
I think he's kind of retired.
Yeah.
He's there in Charleston, and we were going to film him over a year ago. So we have material. So
a little resistant to it, unfortunately.
Well, he's an old salty dog. So yeah.
I fancy myself the ultimate host. I would love for you guys to come down here. I have had some experience on some. Well, I was. You ever heard of a show called The Good Road?
I haven't heard
it's
of that.
relatively new.
Road.
It's in the style of Bourdain, Anthony Bourdain.
Which is
I'll
very much our style. Yeah.
send you guys Charleston and 2 shows on Charleston, and I'm on the first one,
Mhm.
getting interviewed about an incident that happened where when I first came back to Charleston, a lot of my friends from my prep school friends took me to a private social club called the Rifle Club, and we were having a great time there. And they said, "Hey, man," I was back in town. I was new back in town, learning the city again. They said, "Hey, man, this is a great club. It's cheap. The beer's cheap. We come here and bowl or shoot pool. It's really low key." It was in the neighborhood. The neighborhood where I grew up is now gentrified. And I moved back into the neighborhood. Anyway, they said, "Man, it's great." I said, "I don't know, guys." And they said, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, when I was a kid, this was one of the 3 private clubs that were in my all black neighborhood. There were 3 private clubs for when it was a white neighborhood that were still there, that did not allow blacks to come into them,
Interesting.
in my life. And this was the last one that was still standing."
Wow.
And they said, "Oh God, that's history, man. That's not happening anymore. Let's put an application in." I said, "All right." Lo and behold, I did not get accepted. It was a process where I was lined up with people about it, and they voted on us, and I was the only person that didn't get in.
This is like a country club kind of thing?
It's not that nice. That's the thing. It was a low key, just
Like a social club.
like an Elks Lodge, almost social club, just a pure
Elks Lodge,
social
yeah.
club.
Yeah.
I was disappointed and hurt, but I told my friends, I was like, "See, guys, some people aren't ready." And I kind of walked around with that, keeping it to myself for a couple of days. And one of my friends named Dwayne, he was one of the other 6 black kids that were at the prep school we went to. And he was my classmate. And he said, "Hey, you gotta tell that story. You gotta write that down and tell the story and share it with the local news outlet." I said, "I don't want to bring that attention to myself. My approach has always been one person at a time. I'm not going to sit there and scream stuff on a mountaintop." He said, "No, no, no." And so he shared this with me. He said, so Dwayne went to Princeton, and then he went to law school at Iowa, because Iowa has a history of being one of the first schools to admit African Americans to their law school. And he became the first black lawyer to join a firm on Broad Street here in Charleston. That was the big street for the firms. And he told me, he's independent now, but he told me, he said, one of the things I did not like about that time, I loved the opportunity, but I did not like about that time is I never got to sit second seat with some of the big cases with some of the senior partners, because, most of those bonds are made outside of the workplace.
Yep.
I wasn't a member of the country club.
Yep.
I wasn't a member of the hunting club.
Yep.
He said those clubs were so important to your upward mobility that people should know that here's a story yet again in 2016 where, here's a club that's not opening its doors to African Americans.
Oh, wow.
So I told the story. It got picked up by the paper. Then it got picked up by the New York Times.
Oh my God.
And I got to go on CNN with what's the brother's name? Used to be Late Night. I'm drawing a blank right now. So it exploded into a whole story. So I had a little bit of it was a good time in that I got that story out, and I presented it in a way where people really responded to it, because it wasn't me screaming about injustices. It was me saying, "This is the story. Draw your own conclusions. Why is this important?" And I really focused on people's ability to, advance themselves and how this inhibits that. So I told that story again in this show, The Good Road, and it's got some good reviews. It got some good response. And it's just a little bit about me and about Charleston. And I want you to come here because this place, one of the reasons I came home, this is a place where there's most of the African Americans in my age group that wanted to do something left.
Yes.
My sister is 8 years older than me. Her generation went to college, and they all went to Atlanta.
Yep.
That was the promised land.
Yep.
My generation, it was Charlotte and DC. That's where people, or Northern Virginia, I should say, and PG County, I should say.
Yeah.
Everyone did not come home. And I said, I'm going to come home. Charleston is on the map. I'm going to be a part of it. I'm going to be a part of the dream. And I wanted to be that. And that's why I've come home and trying to do so many things right now.
Well, we have really immensely enjoyed this conversation with you, Dr. Brown. And
I enjoyed it.
and obviously, we're not too far away. We've got some connections who are down there in the Carolinas, and we would love to make that trip down. There's so much rich history there, as you've described, and it sounds like your community and your interconnectedness there could only lead to further stories. So the opportunity for us to pack up a car of cameras and head your way is not far-fetced. We would be very happy to do that.
You say when.
Absolutely.
I would love to host you guys down here. And you like food?
No, not at all.
Just a little
Just
bit.
don't tell my
Slightly.
personal trainer, and we will be perfectly fine. Don't tell Carlos. Carlos. Southern. Come on. That's going to be ridiculous. Especially
Yeah, this is
Charleston,
eating
not
town.
Southern. Charleston. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
We trust you know some good spots.
Yeah.
Oh, I do.
So if we were to arrange this, like it would be to come down, what days would be best of the week or weekend? And this is an opportunity also for you to think of some stories, that tune in with kind of what our conversation has been. The visual, sometimes you can visually tell a story.
Yeah.
You don't have to say it. And sometimes that actually can have more impact in a sense. We'll go down there, we'll film B-roll and not interviews, conversations. And maybe there might be something they're like, hey, I've got something. This is a story that you think needs to be told. We're not here to tell the stories,
Okay.
We're here to capture them.
Thanks again for tuning in to Earnest Medicine. Our guest tonight, Dr. Melvin Brown. Such an incredible opportunity to meet this gentleman and hear some of this origin story, and a great segue for us to complete that circle to get down there to the Carolinas. We talked about this whenever we were up in Washington State with Kristen Rhodes and her father there. So there are a lot of connections and a lot of story leads that we can pursue down there. Yep. So
I'm
exciting
excited
stuff.
about the stories and getting those, and the capturing the legacy of it. It's inspiring to me.
Absolutely. Well, we have to say thank you for tuning into this episode of Earnest Medicine. We'll be back for more. We got another one tomorrow, actually. So we're pumping them out. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
And if you happen to find any of this interesting, or more importantly, if you want to collaborate, check out the link below so that you can send us your comments, any stories you may have, anything. We're happy to entertain it. And this is really about us going on a journey together.